Okay, hello everybody. It's now Friday, the 5th of February, 2021. Today's episode on Civil War Chat is a free pass for Northern racists. And before we begin, just a reminder, click on the notification bell in the upper left if you want to be notified of future episodes. And with that, let me go ahead and get started and pull up my notes. First, I want to give an acknowledgement to Eric Davis, who sent me some material that put me on this track. But now let me begin. A free pass for Northern racists. One of the biggest statues on the grounds of the Indiana State Capitol is that of Thomas A. Hendricks. He was the running mate of Samuel Tilden in their popular vote victory, but electoral defeat against Rutherford B. in the 1876 presidential election, an election that most historians consider to have been corrupted. 10 years later, he also served as vice president under the progressive Grover Cleveland. Nonetheless, Hendricks once said, quote, "I say we whites and blacks are not of the same race. We are so different that we ought not to compose one political community," close quote. 106 years after the Hoosiers built their Hendricks statue, the socially progressive stronghold of California erected a statue to novelist Jack London in 1996. 1996. When Jack Johnson became the first black heavyweight boxing champion by defeating a much smaller white man in 1908, London appealed to the retired and undefeated white champion, Jim Jeffries, to return to the ring. Jim Jeffries, he wrote, quote, "must emerge from his alfalfa farm where he was retired and wipe that golden smile from Johnson's face. Jeff, it is up to you. The white man must be rescued," close quote. An habitual boxing enthusiast, London had earlier written, quote, "I cannot but hail as unavoidable the black and brown going down before the white," close quote. Another time he wrote, "I am a white man first and a socialist second," close quote. The toxic influence of the white Northerners' free pass for racism is perhaps most obvious at Yale University. 4 years ago, the undergraduate Calhoun Residential College was renamed, allegedly because 1804 valedictorian John C. Calhoun was a slaveholder. Worse, in 1837, he said, quote, "the relation now existing in the slaveholding states between the black slaves and the whites is instead of an evil, a positive good," close quote. He believed that slavery could better provide for the slaves than the slaves could for themselves. Yet Calhoun mentor and Yale president Timothy Dwight wrote in 1811, quote, "free blacks are generally neither able nor inclined to make their freedom a blessing to themselves. They have no economy and waste much of what they earn," close quote. Other notable antebellum Northerners felt the same way. Massachusetts Yankee, Yale graduate, and telegraph inventor Samuel F.B. Morse wrote in 1863, during the Civil War, that he believes slavery to be divinely ordained and benevolent. Notwithstanding that he has a black wife, New York Mayor de Blasio leaves standing a Morse statue prominently in Central Park. In contrast, he ostentatiously removed a forgotten, obscure plaque to Robert E. Lee in a remote park in a less prosperous borough. Despite his present opposition despite his persistent opposition to the increasingly centralizing power of American government, the zeitgeist demands Calhoun's memory be dominated by the stain of slavery. 3 years after Yale renamed Calhoun College, the South Carolinian's native state removed his statue from a prominent place in Charleston. Yale's influence causes craven Southern white politicians to forsake their ancestors without having the common sense to discover Yale's hypocrisy. The university's Silliman College is named for a man who was once himself a slaveholder and whose mother was the largest slaveholder in Fairfield County, Connecticut. Other slaveholders included Ezra Stiles, John Davenport, and Jonathan Edwards. All were Northerners, and all continue to have Yale residential colleges named for them without controversy. Perhaps most egregious is the university's failure to drop its very name, which was adopted to honor benefactor Elihu Yale. He was an American-born British merchant who, as an administrator in India, participated actively in the slave trade. Apparently, he never set foot in New Haven, Connecticut, where the school is located. His gifts in 1720 were liquidated for about 800 pounds sterling, with an approximate 2021 value of 6 million pounds sterling. But with those, he helped found Yale College, not Yale University. So why not drop the name Yale University at the very least, if not Yale University and Yale College? And whereas the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica praises John C. Calhoun for his, quote, just and kind, close quote, treatment of slaves, and the quote, stainless integrity, close quote, of his character, Elihu Yale had slaves whipped and flogged. He hanged a stable boy for stealing a horse and was eventually removed from his post in India for corruption. It is not the principle of this age that historical Americans who were racist by today's standards must be dishonored. It is rather that they must be dishonored only if they were Southerners. Northerners get a free pass because, well, that's different, see? Okay. If you want to learn more about this and learn more about the true history of the Civil War, let me give you a book to recommend. The Confederacy at Flood Tide, which covers the period from June 1862 to December 1862, which is when the Confederacy had a good chance to win its independence, perhaps more so than any other time during the Civil War. Now, one of the things that you'll find in this book is that Lincoln, when he was considering the Emancipation Proclamation, was fully aware that it could cause a slave uprising in the South, which would, with the Southern soldiers at the battlefront, would likely, if not likely, certainly he realized it was a possibility that such a slave uprising would cause massacre of women and children. He was aware of that. He admitted that in a meeting less than 2 weeks before he announced the Emancipation Proclamation, in a meeting at the White House with abolitionists from Chicago. You don't read about that from other history books, do you? It's fact. and you can get it footnoted in here. I mean, not only the stories in here, but the documentation that cites the presentation that he made, and his exact words is in this book, The Confederacy at Flood Tide. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. It's $28. If you want an autographed copy, you can get it directly from me. You email me, Phil, PHIL _ Leigh, LEIGH at me.com. Okay, that's our show, and thanks for watching.